Hello and welcome back to the Nerd Impact Podcast for our 30th episode. Quite a bit of a milestone for us, so thank you for tuning in. But today we are discussing the second horror movie for this podcast, and we've chosen the original Scream movie. So as of course the latest installation has been released, I think a week or two ago. It was quite recently, but
This week, yeah.
this week, yeah.
As
So
of recording.
as of recording, so quite a recent addition to Wes Craven's awesome series of sort of meta slasher films. But Aiden, why the choice of Scream?
Well, yeah, so as you just said, the new one is out. Technically, it's just Scream, not Scream 5, but it's Scream 5,
Yeah.
um, which is getting raving reviews. So we kind of thought we'd do the first one in kind of preparation to go and watch the new one, whatever you want to call it, reboot, Scream 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And Scream is, for a lot of people and myself, is a very iconic horror film. I mean, it's an iconic film in itself for the horror movement. It was released in '96. Slashers and stuff were kind of on their way out or done by now. And then they kind of reinvented the game with Wes Craven's Scream, and it had a lot of imitators and copycats as it followed on into the '90s. But this film is great. It's so influential, and you know, meta is something that I'm absolutely a huge fan of. I love meta stuff when it's done
Mm-hmm.
right, and Scream is an absolute gem of a film that kind of looks at horror tropes and the horror franchises and mocks it whilst inventing a whole new ballpark for itself. Yeah, this is a great film. It's one of my favorites. I don't watch it as much as some of the others because as the older slashers are legit like slash and hack films where you're just watching it for the kills. Where
Yeah.
it's got quite an intricate plot. There's a lot going on. And it's one that I like to sit and concentrate to watch. So when I do watch it, I have to make sure I'm kind of sat down, kind of engaged with it. This is one of the first, up there with the Elm Street series, the Friday the 13th. This was one of the first horror franchises that I kind of got into. It was probably my first major exposure to like meta humor and stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
was probably about 12, 13. So, we're going back a good 15 years. In fact, I'm pretty sure I I watched the first one but left the rest. And then in 2010, I think it was 2009, 2010, the Scream 4 came out. So
Oh
I went
yeah.
back and watched one and then followed on with two and three. So yeah, Scream 1 is by far one of the most influential films for me. I do love Scream 4. And there was talk between us and Ben, who unfortunately hasn't joined us today, of doing the whole franchise in preparation for the new Scream, but we thought we'd kind of tackle them on their own because there's a lot I could talk about, especially with Scream 4 in itself. But yeah, Scream 1, huge film for me. As I've said before, I'm a huge horror fan,
Mm-hmm.
and this one absolutely kind of stands up there as one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, what about you, Nath?
Well, yeah. I mean, as we mentioned, Ben, we did have a discussion of with Ben, who's usually co-hosting with us, to do the whole franchise. But the first time I actually watched Scream was pretty much watching the whole franchise with Ben. So, we went through them one after the other. So for me, it was in terms of my, I watched Scream before I'd sort of seen much other sort of horror movie content. So I wasn't necessarily aware of the tropes being sort of played upon, or sort of the deconstruction that sort of takes place and the sort of parody elements to it. So for me, I was sort of just watching it, straight as just a straight horror film and appreciating for what it was rather than seeing the depth of it. But this time, going back and watching it, having more knowledge of what they're targeting with this sort of thing, the way it's sort of structured, and the tropes that it does attack. Well, it's not necessarily attack, but sort of like reframe and repurpose, I suppose, and in some ways sort of idolize that. Yeah, there's so much to it, and it stands out as sort of, as I said at the beginning, sort of a meta slasher, because that's sort of where in the meat of it is that even from the first sort of like 5-10 minutes, you have the killer asking sort of like horror movie questions of the poor Drew Barrymore, and she gets it wrong when she says it's Jason that was the killer in Friday the 13th and that, and discussion of Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's very, very, clearly within this wider scope, and that very sort of self-aware sort of element of it, I suppose in some way makes the horror even better when you think about it, because it's like it's clearly a film made for horror fans, and so it's not just playing to the tropes. It's got to find some other way to sort of freak you out and scare you, and so by having the great narrative that it does have and all the twists and turns as to who the Ghostface killer is, it sort of adds a whole different dimension to the horror, I suppose. 'Cause it's not just a hack and slash. It's really something quite to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to the opening with Barrymore, I mean, obviously, I wasn't old enough, or I was only like 3 when it came out. But I think for anyone, even if they didn't watch it in theaters, that they kind of had Drew Barrymore as the poster child. They were
Mm,
marketing it as her as being the main character, and obviously that was an extremely well done bait and switch where she's killed off in the first 10 minutes, and no one was expecting that. And I think it was genius. Again, it was a kind of another deconstruction of the horror franchise. You're introduced to your main character almost instantly. You're
yeah.
going to be following them throughout the whole film. They're going to be the final girl who's makes it through. Well, no, not in this film. Your what you thought was final girl is gutted, literally gutted, in the first 10 minutes of this film, and it's a great way of showing the one the the subversion of the horror element, but also
Mhm.
it raises the stakes of this film. All of a sudden, you're not safe. You don't know what's going on in this film. What you thought was the norm and the tropes have just been took out from beneath you. And yeah, it's so good. Also, fair play to Drew Barrymore to be, you know, literally in a film that she's shot for 5 days and has 10 minutes of screen time. That's a glorified cameo at best. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I think the first 15 odd minutes of this is absolutely superb. The way it
Mm.
sort of, as you said, it sort of subverts the audience's expectations, but also the way it sort of builds the tension. Is that when she first gets the phone call, she's all kind of happy, and she's almost like flirting with the guy, and he's
Mm.
almost sort of flirting with her, and so it's all very like and all that sort of thing until he says, "Well, I just want to know who I'm looking at," and then it's sort of like immediately sort of flips the game, and it just builds from there. She runs around locking all the doors, looking all the windows and that. But I think it's superb with the sort of popcorn going on as that sort of like the tension is almost
Yeah.
physically represented within the popcorn bag as it gets more and more blown up and there's smoke everywhere. But I think it's a superb entrance and start to a film because it really really sets it up. You got the killer very vocal and very present. He talks more than Drew Barrymore does. Like he's
Yep.
talking at her for most of it, and he gets more and more riled up, and you can feel the anger in him. But I was surprised when he guts her boyfriend first.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't remembered how sort of horrible that is. Like he's got full on
I
intestines and
think
everything hanging out.
that's genuinely kind of forgotten about. That first kill is actually not Drew Barrymore, it's her
Yeah.
boyfriend, and it kind of goes by the wayside. And I know we discussed in our scary movie episode that they use that bit and like have the whole like it looks like Prince sort of guy. But yeah, I mean, also that's the thing. Again, the impact of this film is it set off. One, it was the first meta kind of horror film, but
Hmm.
it inadvertently made it had a spoof made of it, so the meta became even more meta. It was brilliant, and like we discussed, so we won't go over too much. But scary movie, found their feet there, and a bit of trivia for you that Scream was originally supposed to be called Scary Movie. And
Ah,
they they
okay.
they say they say like the phrase "scary movie" in Scream about 5 times. So I think they were originally building it to be called that, and then they changed it up.
Hmm.
And the reason it's called Scream is because Ghostface looks like the famous Scream painting.
Oh yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
who the artist is, but I know exactly the one you're talking about.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
oh, that's
really
interesting
interesting.
trivia.
Um, yeah, but then we get to our main cast, and Neve Campbell is up there as one of the best final girls. Probably that's a tough one for me. She's in the top three, with
Yeah.
Nancy Thompson from the Elm Street series, and oh god, it's just completely gone from me. Oh, Yeah, I completely forgot him. And the other one I was going to say was that you know, Wes Craven obviously did the Elm Street series, and the ones he directed were brilliant. And then he,
Mm,
did the Scream franchise. And I know there's a different. The opinions are kind of split on two and three, but I know for a fact
yeah.
one and four are quite well loved. And again, I've heard a lot of good stuff about the new one without, unfortunately, Wes Craven, who passed
Hmm.
2015. But yeah, so Neve Campbell is an incredible character. Again, they kind of subvert the tropes of, she's a weakling, she's pretty badass constantly through and through.
Hmm.
She the only sort of kind of her weakness, or her showing that she's, a little bit fragile, is the fact that obviously her mother was raped and killed a year ago in the story. So she's still kind of reeling from that. And
Yeah.
that's really her only kind of bit of fragility, I suppose, that makes her, vulnerable.
Hmm.
But apart from that, when Ghostface starts taunting her and stuff, she's quippy, she's ready for it. Again, she's deconstructing the subversion. She's like, oh, he'd probably be chasing some big-breasted bimbo who'll run up the stairs instead of
Yep.
running for the front door. Even though she does that herself, actually, after she tries to go to the front door, which
She
again,
does. Yeah.
another great, commentary on horror films. You've got Courtney Cox, who, again, this whole subversion of stuff. Everyone knew her as, Monica from Friends, the kind of, you know, clean freak OCD, a bit peppy sort of person. She's a stone cold bitch in
She
this
is such
film.
a bitch.
She is savage. Like Kenny the cameraman deserves so much better.
He does. He does. Um, I,
Um,
I do want to say though, just before we move on to more of the plot, that I I really struggled to take this movie seriously in the context of scary movie. In
oh,
the
because of Scary
Because
Movie.
of scary, like
Yeah,
the degree to which Scary Movie does such a great job of spoofing it, it's
yeah.
almost like scene for scene, and so like my just immersion was just at points are just completely like torn away from me when I was
I
thinking,
used
oh
I used to have that, and you know what? That's kind of weird on the whole impact sort of side of this. Is
yeah,
I watched Scary Movie first.
mm-hmm,
Obviously, some plot elements are different, and obviously, excuse me, the twist and stuff in Scream is completely taken out. But
yeah,
um, yeah, a lot of the things obviously I saw in Scary Movie, I then saw in Scream, so I saw it on the flip, and I was like you when I first watched it. I was a bit like, "This isn't a Scary Movie. Oh, this is a bit of a Scary Movie when." And
yeah,
I think I've watched it enough times now, 'cause, I watch it every couple of years, that
mm-hmm.
I have kind of managed to separate the two. But I absolutely understand where you're coming from there. It is basically like scene for scene in some bits.
Yeah, and I will say that did have an impact on my sort of
Yeah.
fear element, but still, I still really enjoyed the Price is Right. There's still so much tension there, and
Yeah,
it is
it's definitely,
different, right? Like it's
it's
not,
just a well crafted film. I don't
yeah,
find it scary at all anymore. Even when I watched it as a teen, I think the more, not, I wouldn't even say scary part, but the kind of haunting part and the bit that keeps you on edge is because the killer's identity is such a mystery, and you are
yeah,
given a lot of red herrings, and that's kind of the part that you're like, oh, this is kind of, I wonder what's going to happen. But apart from that, yeah, I'm the same as you. But going back to the cast very quickly, because we've got some
hmm,
absolute star power here. Obviously David Arquette as Detective Dewey, who
hmm,
again amazing, and as most people know, Courtney Cox and him obviously got married and got together because of Scream, so that was kind of cool. Um, we've got the absolute king of this film, Matthew Lillard, who
incredible
who
performance,
goes above hard and beyond to play Stu, who's an absolute head case. Um,
so
you
brilliant.
know, I he there's a few bits where I'm a bit like, "Well, you took this too far," but 90% of the
Mm.
time I'm like, "This works so well." Like that, I'm feeling a little woozy here. Like literally, is so good. I know he's very well known for obviously a lot of
Shaggy.
things, but I think Shaggy and Stu from Scream are kind of his,
We
holy
we
grails.
we do need to cover the live action Scooby Doo, at least
Yes,
the first
yes, we
one,
do.
because I
Yeah, start with the
adore that
second one.
movie. I adore
Yeah,
the first
absolutely.
one. It's It's such a fever dream. I mean, I'm not trying to get us derailed, but I'll just say that much. There's something about that film, and Matthew Lillard's performance in that as well is so
I don't think you
so.
can talk about Matthew Lillard without talking about Scream or Scooby Doo, so I feel
Mhm.
like it's kind of apt to talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Um, you've also got Jamie Kennedy as Randy Meeks, who is basically you and me in the film, I'd
yep.
say. You know,
It's sort of like an
the
audience surrogate sort of thing.
yeah, absolutely. Then you've got Skeet Ulrich as Billy,
Very,
Sydney's
very.
boyfriend.
I will say that I'd forgotten how creepy a performance he pulls off. Like even from the first bit where he like climbs into Sydney's bedroom, he has that the way he does sort of like a low whisper. He sort of talks in the way his hair's framed around his
So
eyes.
creepy. It's
Yeah.
kind he kind of looks like Johnny Depp when he was young, and what makes that
Mm.
even funnier is the first scene in the Nightmare on Elm Street, well, not the first scene, but the first kind of time you meet Nancy is Johnny Depp's character climbing through her
Yep.
window as
Mm.
Billy does. So again, Wes Craven loves that stuff. Then we've also got the only other one worth kind of talking about is Rose McGowan,
Hmm.
who is Tatum, but I always knew her as Paige from Charmed. That yeah, yeah, the
That
sister from Charmed.
I knew her from somewhere.
Yeah,
We should discuss Charmed actually. That's a good show.
yeah, it is. Yeah, but that's where I knew her from. So obviously, a lot of people knew her from Scream because I think she joined Charmed afterwards.
Mm,
But
mm,
yeah, she obviously was from Scream fame, and again, she plays a very kind of she wouldn't say bitchy, but she's like a bit of like a two faced,
mm.
typical high school girl. Which again, she fits the crowd very well. Oh, sorry, one more. Obviously, it's kind of not a cameo, but like a secondary character is we have the one and only the Fonz as the head teacher.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I didn't realize till this time round, and I was like,
a
"I
much
know
older
you."
Fonz though.
Yeah, it's the Fonz. So yeah, every time he came on, I was just like, "Hey," and then I was like, "Yeah,
Hey.
okay, it's less funny every time I do it now." But yeah, so that's how cast rounding off, and yeah, fantastic cast. You know, it's a very '90s cast,
Hmm.
but somehow even in Scream 4, and again from what I've heard in the new Scream, they just slip back into it, but have shifted into the new kind of tropes and new technology and everything that's kind of
Yeah.
changed around it. They've kind of molded them characters around that. So yeah, I'm very excited. But again, this film doesn't feel dated apart from really the telephones in my eyes. Like
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the proof is the fact that they're doing a new Scream now. But you could have literally took this exact, like, if it had never been done before, for example, you
Hmm.
could take the exact plot from Scream 1 and just pop it straight down now and change the phones for iPhones, and it would have had the same effect, which inherently is why Scream 5 is coming out. But it's so well done. I can't say that enough. It's so clever. I love a good film that is. I love meta films, but I also
Yeah.
like films that are clever, and this film is very clever. I mean, the twist in itself is something that I never clocked the first time. Like I genuinely had no idea who it could have been the first time.
I would say the same. That like as you said, there's so many red herrings. There's so many little signs that you could pick up on, but I didn't know the first time around, and I was still surprised. And I mean, do you want to explain the twist?
Yeah, we can
Suppose
go for it. I mean, if people, okay, spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't watched Scream, but
I don't.
I'd
Wow,
like to think,
this is
I'd
a
like to think, I'd
20
like
year
to
old
think you
film.
have. Yeah, I'd like to think you have, and then go and watch the sequels, even though the third one's a bit shit. But
I like
go
the
and watch
second
them. They're
one's
all
pretty good as well.
yeah, and Scream 4 is great because it was the
Mm,
first one to kind of touch on the new wave of horror films, the new tropes, and the new technology and stuff. So yeah, go and
yeah.
watch them, and then go and watch the new one, as I'm hopefully planning to do in the next week or so. But
Hmm.
yeah, so the twist for um, Scream One
Hmm.
is that so you initially do think it's you as the audience, and Sydney, the main character, thinks it's her boyfriend Billy.
Yep.
After a near miss with Ghostface, he kind of ominously turns up quite soon after
Hmm.
Ghostface disappears, climbs through the window and drops a telephone that's not his.
Yep.
And she's like, "Oh, it must be you." But then Ghostface shows up again, and obviously Billy's in prison at this time. He's been arrested, so she's like, "Okay, it must not be Billy." So the twist here is that one, Ghostface. So when Ghostface attacks him at the end of the third act in the house party,
Yep.
um, Billy gets stabbed. So you're like, okay, it's definitely not Billy. And then you find out that it was actually Stu who
Mm-hmm.
was Ghostface. And then Billy comes downstairs and then shoots.
It's
No,
Randy, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, he shoots Randy. That's right. He shoots Randy, and you find out that it was him and Stu in cahoots.
Yep.
And it's been both of them switching each time in order to obviously kind of prevent it from looking like it was just one person. It's a very, very clever twist. Again, was quite innovative at the time. You know, having two killers playing the same guy. Um, and the lack of sorry, not the lack, but well, it is a bit of a lack of motive. The motive is basically him and Stu were the ones who killed Sydney's mom a year
Mm-hmm.
ago. They put the blame on someone called Cotton Weary, I think, who
Yep.
is explored more in the third one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or maybe the second one. I can't remember. I haven't watched that one in a while.
I
But
think it's the third one.
I think it is the third one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they were the ones who killed Sydney's mom. Then they decide that they're going to put all of this murdering spree in the house, and all the other ones that have
Mm-hmm.
happened beforehand on Sydney's dad. Um, and basically, the reason they killed Sydney's mom is because Sydney's mom was quote unquote a bit of a whore. She
Yeah.
slept with
Billy's dad.
Billy's dad, and hence Billy's mom ran away, and his family was broke up. So it was basically a revenge plot. Kind of quite a good revenge plot. There was nothing kind of pointing it to that direction, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, brilliant. And again, the whole kind of final act with um she kills Stu and then shoots Billy, and then Randy's like, this is normally the part where the bad guy comes back for one last scare, and he as he goes to, she like literally caps him straight in the head.
Yep.
Again, another very quick meta scene, but again, it was again executed very well and not corny. And that's the one thing that I love
Mm-hmm.
about this film is it's rarely, unless it's intentional, it's not corny for the sake of it. It's executed in a very like kind of brilliant way. Really, is the best way to put it.
It definitely takes like the plot and all the characters very seriously. Like even Randy, when you said like he's probably the most sort of corny aspect, where he's like, oh, this is all very self-referential and all very like he as you said, he's the audience surrogate. So everything's it's from X and Y is from this movie, or as you said, like it's where most of the meta commentary comes from, and that can be a little bit on the nose, but it never sort of detracts from the seriousness of what's going on. Like they don't it doesn't come at the cost of the narrative, and I think the best way I've sort of viewed this film is more of a thriller than a horror film, really, because the only really horror aspect of it is as I said, like some of the graphic kills, I suppose, but it doesn't. It's more sort of figuring out who the killer is, where the sort of tension
Yeah.
comes from, rather than so it is, I suppose, more of a thriller
I
than a
think
horror
back in the
film.
90s, you'd have classed this as a horror, but
Of
we've come a
course,
long way.
yeah,
The audiences have kind of become more susceptible and a bit more kind of used to graphic
graphic
violence.
violence.
We kind of started off with the Saw franchise and how the torture porn stuff. Human Centipede. Like they've gone some really
Unpleasant
disgusting,
places. Yeah.
yeah, and disgusting lengths to kind of shock audiences now. But I don't think you need that. I
Yeah.
do love a good slash. Don't get me wrong. I love watching some gruesome kills, but there's not really any slashers since even when I was a teen, bar a few that really scared me. The
Yeah.
ones that scare me are the ones that are psychological, or put you
Absolutely.
in put you in a position where you're like, that could really happen, or
Mm.
it's the fear of the unknown.
Hmm.
There's none of that in this film really, bar who is the killer. And like I said, that's the one thing I think that kind of keeps you a bit on edge.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it is, and even then the kills, there isn't many kills in it,
Mm.
for a slasher as such. It's only about 6 or 7 kills in it.
Yeah.
And they're all, no, they're not tame, that's a lie. The first two, like you said, are
Yeah.
quite gory.
Mm.
But the principal's death is kind of mundane. The
Hmm.
final death blow is off screen. I must say Tatum's kill, is quite the most famous one. The garage
Oh
scene.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that would happen in real life, but again, it was kind of cool to see in a
Hmm.
film. It was quite creative, and then obviously spoof the shit out of in Scary Movie. Um,
Incredible scene in Scary Movie as well.
it is very good. But even then, in the Scream version, there is a bit of humor. Like
Hmm.
Ghostface, after he does it, kind of like has that kind of moment where he's like, like he doesn't laugh, but he kind of like
Yeah, you can
he's
see his
got that moment.
hesitation.
He's
Yeah.
basking in like how absurdly cool that kill was. Um, so yeah, yeah, it's a good film. Like you said, I don't think I'd class it as a horror anymore,
Yeah,
but
not for modern audiences, I suppose, really.
no, but like you said, I think it works as a whodunit now, which I think
Hmm.
as a mystery film as such.
With a bit more of the sort of teenage flair, I suppose, of slasher films, and it is very very 90s, and like not even so much as the way they talk or all of that, just the whole vibe, I guess. I mean, it is a film from the 90s, but just that whole sort of uh, teenage fixation, I suppose, was always a big part of 90s films and that. And so, no, I think you are right that, and as I said, sort of as a thriller, it functions much better than as a straight up horror film, I suppose. But then again, when you're deconstructing horror tropes, it's like if I think of a straight up horror film, it'd be something like, I don't know, like the Hills Have Eyes or something, because
Oh Jesus Christ, no!
it's just not enjoyable, right? Like it's not bad. The first one, the second one's utter garbage, but those are like films where it's what's going on the screen is horrific, but in Scream, not necessarily. It's more the overall psychological tension of having a killer going around and like the constant threat of that. But Sydney handles it with an absolute aplomb. Like she's such a badass, basically. Like she's at first pretty spooked out by it all, like pretty freaked out
As you would be,
as you would
yeah.
be. But she very quickly like I like just like how angry she gets, like
Yeah.
especially in the later films as well. Like she just, especially I think like sort of Scream 3 about, she just gets more sort of just exhausted by the whole sort of
Yeah,
thing.
she's like, "I'm not
She's like,
taking any shit
yeah, she's
anymore."
fed up with it all, which is
Also, I know this is really kind of breaking away from it, but I just remembered who my second, final girl was, and it's Laurie Strode from Halloween, obviously. Like,
Uh,
I complete
yeah, I was gonna
I
say
knew it
Jamie
was
Lee
there.
Curtis, and
Yeah, I knew it was there. I
yeah,
just completely went away from it, but, I was about to say is I like that they're watching Halloween
hmm,
in Scream, and Randy's like, "Jamie, look out behind you! Jamie, look out behind you!" And obviously, Ghostface is walking up.
yep,
Another small tidbit is the actor who plays Randy is called Jamie, so he's again the whole meta kind of is taking another step further. He's like, "I should probably
yeah,
look behind me."
yeah,
But again, I love that subversion because I was like, "Dude, I don't want him to die. He's awesome." And
hmm.
you do think he's about to die, and then obviously he gets distracted, Ghostface, and goes off. Um, but speaking of impact and stuff, we've got to talk about Ghostface. I mean, he even since Scream One, he's become another poster child of horror characters that are extremely famous now.
That reminds me, I don't know if we still have photos of it, but Ben and I, after watching Scream, we actually went to Halloween
Yep.
as I mean, it was literally just like a black cloak with the skull face mask, but sorry, ghost face mask. But like that for us when we'd watch it, it was a big deal. Like we loved the Scream movies, and
Didn't you both carve knives? Like you made woodwork knives with Grandad?
well, no, like for viewers who don't know, like, well, I don't think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but our granddad was a carpenter, so sort of like part time, and so he had a whole sort of carpentry rig in his garage, and so Ben and I used it a lot when we were younger to make weapons of war, basically. So I remember for that Halloween, I had a big scythe, and Ben had I think he had a machete of some sort, I believe, if I remember correctly.
I do think though he did make the um. It's not a kitchen knife that Ghostface has, but it has like the
It's
knife with like the kind of
butcher's, is it?
it's like, yeah, it's like a bent curve at the top, isn't there?
No, because it's sort of just like straight knife
It's
with
like a
sort of,
straight knife, but then it has
yeah.
like it's like has a sort of like curve at the top of the tip of the knife.
I'm
And Ben
no
did,
chef, so I don't know what you'd call that knife. It's like,
no, nor me, but Ben did make that. I don't know if he
yeah,
made it for the Scream.
because I remember we painted we used
Blood on it.
red
Yeah.
paint on the end. So I don't know if we have any photos of that, but it'd be cool to put them in the video. But
Just for viewers to know, our granddad is an absolutely incredible person, and no way possible, shape or form was promoting violence.
nope.
He was just having bonding time with his grandkids, and these weapons were never used to hurt anyone. We do not condone real life violence, just in films.
Thank you, Aiden, for that PSA. But no, we didn't use them as physical weapons of war, but we did make a lot of them over the years, and part of our costume was made with our granddad. So, the impact of this film is part of our quality time with our granddad was spent building part of an outfit that was built around this film, really. So that's a massive impact for us.
Not that Grandad knew what Scream was. I
Well,
don't think he ever watched that, but he was just all for it. I
mm.
mean, like you said, you had Ben to watch with, but I don't actually think I watched it with anyone. I think I watched it on my own.
Oh,
My
really?
dad loves horror films, but
Hmm.
he didn't start watching them with me till I'd kind of found my feet with them. I mean, he used to work a lot, so I spent a lot of time at home, either buying them on DVD or, borrowing them from friends and watching them. And then he started watching them with me. So yeah, for the first few, films and especially Scream, I didn't have anyone to watch it with. And I think that's kind of it's a great film to watch with someone who's not watched it before. So you can
Yeah.
watch the twists unfold knowing that what you know and they don't is always exciting. And I think I did do that with people later on. I was kind of the one who knew what was going on, and um, they didn't, which was great.
It's
Um,
always a nice experience watching a film with someone with twists like this, and being able to sort of watch their reaction for the first time.
yeah,
It's a nice
100%.
nice experience.
I mean, again, impact on this. I've mentioned it before, but I'm a huge fan. Well, was a huge fan. I don't collect them anymore. Of the Blu-ray steelbooks.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of steelbooks, that kind of go out of print and are quite rare. And I was fortunate enough to grab the Scream one, the first one as well. Um,
Hmm.
for our YouTube audiences, you can see it. I mean, I'll describe it. It's Ghostface on the
Beautiful.
front, looking about to stab someone. There's got the infamous Drew Barrymore scene on the back with holding the butcher's knife. But yeah, that's out of print now. Quite hard to find. I'm sure it's worth a bob or two. But again, that's how much I liked this film. I didn't buy steelbooks willy nilly at the beginning. I must say,
Hmm.
I did get a bit obsessed near the end. But Scream was one of the first horror steelbooks I brought. And was very lucky. I think I found it on like Facebook Marketplace or eBay or something for like 15 quid, whereas it was going for 40, 50 at the time. So yeah, a very influential film that I'm proud to kind of have in my special collection of Blu-rays.
His very very large selection of Blu-rays. We probably have one of the biggest collections of everyone I know, because
Yeah,
Blu-rays sort of have fallen off a bit now. I don't think people
they have.
really
Yeah,
buy
they
them
have.
anymore.
It's still streaming, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
that's that's why I stopped. I must say,
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it, and there's the odd one or two I sometimes get.
Hmm.
Again, depending on the art style and stuff, or if there's collector's editions, because if you're a big enough
Of
fan,
course. Yeah.
you will. But yeah, Blu-rays have died. I mean, I carried it on for much longer than some of my friends who did it with me at school. Um,
Hmm.
but even I came to terms that the demand for Blu-rays is slowly fading away, and streaming is becoming the way forward, or just buying them, through Amazon and stuff to stream. Um, I still go to the cinema. Like I said, I'm going to go and watch the new Scream in cinema.
Hmm.
Um, if I didn't, I'd have brought it. When it became available on like the premieres. I don't know
Yeah.
what service might do it. But I think Sky Cinema for the UK, they get a lot of premieres. You pay 15 quid, and you're basically paying the same you'd pay for a cinema ticket to just watch it from home. Um, but yes,
Which is a shame, because probably the cinema experience would still be better, right? Like, but
I
especially,
think for these sort of films, definitely as
yeah,
well. Like,
yeah,
you know, well, I say that every film really you should go and watch in the cinema. But I think your big
hmm,
two are your big blockbuster action films, such
yeah,
as like the Avengers and like the new Spider-Man that came out. But I still think horror films, like, I went to see A Quiet Place too. And the atmosphere in the cinema, because obviously everyone's trying to be quiet, and like when people
hmm,
jump and they get scared, you know, that's part of the experience. And again, like I said, I was fortunate to watch Scream 4 in cinema. I'm assuming that people, when they watch Scream in the cinema, probably, that almost gasp for air and that constant tension was there, and I think they'd be great
yeah,
to watch. I mean, cinemas have clocked on that films are becoming cult classics, and they do re-releases of films in the cinema.
hmm,
I don't know if they did it with Scream. It's a shame if they didn't, because I know they did it with like Terminator 2, and they did it with Alien, and I went
yeah.
and watched them, and oh man, even though obviously it was, I had watched the film before, to see it on the big screen is a completely different ballpark, and it was incredible.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, if anyone works in a cinema, or this goes out anywhere, cinemas should do a Scream marathon. I think that'd be something that's worth the go, especially in days where people are not too sure about going to the cinema because
Mm,
of obviously
yeah.
COVID and stuff. We support the cinema still is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Streaming is great, and for films that are inaccessible, I don't know how accessible Scream is anymore on uh, DVD and Blu-ray. I'm assuming quite accessible still, but
Hmm.
for some films they're harder to find. Um, but this film is absolutely phenomenal. I'd go and watch it in the cinema again, and I enjoy it every time because I notice different things, and I think that's when you've got a good film on your hands, is
Yeah.
when you can rewatch it, still enjoy it, but then you're also clocking on new things. That shows good writing, that shows clever, directing, and Easter eggs and stuff. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. It really upsets me that Wes Craven's passed away. Like, he is a
Hmm.
phenomenal horror director. Speaking of which, I also forgot. Obviously, that speaking of Easter eggs and stuff, that really on your nose, in the face Freddy Krueger reference
Yep.
when the head teacher kind of like shits himself, looks outside and shouts at someone. He's like, "Oh, not you, Fred!" And he's literally in Freddy Krueger's
Yep.
red and green sweater with the bloody hat on and
And
everything.
everything. Yeah.
I was like, no, I like it personally, but that's because I'm a huge Freddy Krueger fan. But yeah,
Hmm.
such a good film. I mean, anything else you really want to add on to that?
Uh, I mean, yeah. I mean, Wes Craven is an absolute hallmark of the horror movie genre, and it is very sad that he's passed. But I think from the sounds of it, it seems like the new Scream movie has actually done his creation some justice, and has sort of revitalized it a bit, and sort of recreating the experience of the original film for a new different era. And I think it speaks to the fundament the brilliance of the fundamental ideas, that sort of tension of a killer, and especially just via the phone, being able to intimidate someone like that, and not knowing who it could be, that the gimmicky nature of just wearing a plastic mask, yet having that character, that sort of visage, that silhouette, be so terrifying in a way is brilliant. And the fact that the audiences and critics alike are still sort of resonating with these ideas, and the horror of it, and sort of more, I suppose, more the thriller aspect, and if you're going being consistent, is awesome. It speaks to how brilliant his creativity was, that he was able to create something that still resonates with people to this day.
I think the other thing that's scary about the Scream films, and I know Scream 3 is a bit of a push, but the rest of them is the killer's always someone you know. And I
Mm,
think that's kind of scary in itself, that, this
yeah,
person that you think is, your friend, your lover, relative, or however they are, you think you know them, and actually they're like, they've got this extremely dark, twisted, psychotic side to them. And that's quite terrifying. And, unfortunately in the real world that happens,
it's true. Yeah, the
it's
killer,
people the people or, and it's always that famous line, "Oh, I didn't know that about them," or "I didn't think they had
Mm.
that in them." So it's a bit of a weird downer ending. Just yeah, check that your friends aren't serial killers or psychopaths, and I'm
Well,
sure you'll be fine. Or if
yeah,
you need guidance, watch the Scream films. They will give you some
they'll,
very
they'll give you the red
clever
flags
tips
to
and
watch
tricks.
out for,
Yeah,
really.
absolutely,
Random phones
absolutely.
dropping out of their pockets,
Yeah,
disappearances at key
disappear. Yeah.
times.
If they, have an issue with your mom or dad, maybe you need to check on that. If they're, their relative, and they're trying to push sex on you, which is something that you should never do,
Absolutely not.
that's a fucking red flag in itself. But I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
like, yeah, then cut that person loose.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, any other red flags people should look out for in case they choose not to watch this incredible film?
I
I
mean,
think if
I'm
you're
no
anything,
serial killer expert.
well, I'm just going off the screen films. I
Yeah,
think if anyone likes Matthew Lillard's character Stu in Scream, probably should get rid of that person in your life too. If they act like Stu in any particular way, probably get rid of that person as well. If anything, have Randys in your life. Have a
yeah.
Randy in your life.
Have
If
a
they're
Randy in
giving
your
you
life.
tops and tips about horror films, if they're giving you information that you normally find quite annoying, it might just save your life. And I think that's what we
Absolutely.
all need here.
Well,
But yeah,
no.
I think it's been a shorter episode today. It's a
Mhm.
shame Ben couldn't join us, but I still think I got my love out for Scream, and I think you did too. I'd love to hear other people's stories on Scream and, the impact of Ghostface. Did people go as Ghostface for Halloween? Was this their first horror film? Did they
Hmm.
pick out the twists? Also, what's your favorite in the franchise? And let us know. That'd be great. I'm very excited to watch Scream
The
5
new
slash
one, yeah.
Scream this week. But yeah, I think that's it for today, guys. And we'll see you for episode 31.
Thank you for tuning in.